2, and 1. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is our final debate for the summer school morning class. It is between Ilina and Sarah, so congratulations for getting to finals. Ilina, you are higher seed. You can call heads or tails.
Heads.
Okay, it is flipping, flipping, flipping. It is heads. Would you like side or speaker position?
I would like side position and I choose con.
Okay, Sarah, you are pro. Would you like to be first or second?
Second, please.
Cool. Sarah is second and pro. Ilina is first and con. I'll give you about 1 minute to prepare your documents, and then we will start our debate. Okay, Ilina, you about ready? You want to share your screen and begin? You are welcome to.
May I start?
Yes.
Mukherjee makes all secondary schools in the United States require all students to wear school uniforms at school. My sole contention is financial cost. Subpoint A, school uniforms increase financial cost. Gouge William, who has a degree Doctor of Education, wrote in 2011, school uniforms would only be a financial burden on families who shop at discount stores for their children's clothes if the discount stores do not carry the required clothing items. Subpoint B, school uniforms increase financial cost. Education Policy of Social Analysis wrote in 2019. If a student attends a school where 50 to 75% of his or her peers wear uniform, survey students believe that the students in their school are 9 times more likely to drop out due to the high cost of school uniforms. Subpoint C, financial cost is the most important because it is one of the most significant factors in a person's life. Financial burdens are harmful because many people in debt have a multitude of issues that come with it later in life.
Okay, questions from the audience. Raise your hand if you have a question, or I will call on you at random. All right, let's start out with someone at random. Oh, no, Mira, go ahead.
For your first card, it says that it was written in 2011. How do we know that still applies today? And also there's no evidence for it. And it's just a warrant. So how do we know it's true?
You would know it's true because it is a logical warrant, and this warrant was taken from an educator along with multiple other studies that were considered when making this warrant. So it would be a pretty logical one.
Okay, Anushka.
Okay, so here you have no data or no studies. This is just it could be just a assumption. So why do you expect us to believe this?
I actually do have a study in the second subpoint B. I do have a study which was taken into consideration quite a few students. So and the first one is a warrant.
First, you only have a warrant, so how do you know it's not an assumption? And how can you just go off and say that it makes sense because it's logical?
It does make sense because there were other studies taken and it's from an educator. While I do have data in the second card, though not in the first one, backing up the claim made in the second card, which could also be considered a warrant if the first one's not good evidence for you.
Awesome, that is time. Sarah, you ready to go? Share your screen.
Chen affirms, resolved, all secondary schools in the United States require all students to wear school uniforms at school. My sole contention is gang violence. Subpoint A, school uniforms decrease gang violence. Gang Intelligence Committee wrote in 1996, school uniforms may decrease violence and theft, prevent gang members from wearing gang colors and insignia at school, and enable school officials to recognize school intruders. Many local communities have adopted school uniforms as part of an overall program to improve school safety and discipline. Subpoint B, decreasing violence is the top priority because schools must protect their students first and foremost. If kids are scared of injury, they won't be able to focus on schoolwork or any other task. Keeping students healthy and well surpasses all other needs because the cost of human life is much more than any other potential gain or cost.
Okay, that is time. Questions from the audience? Raise your hand if you have a question, or I will call at someone at random. Go ahead, Juju.
This was written in 1996. So how do you know that this information is still relevant?
Well, when it comes to safety and gangs, not much has changed. For example, violence in schools would probably not change as much, and it wouldn't be affected as much by technology developing or anything else.
Eugene?
A lot of the time, school uniforms are often just, white shirts and certain types of pants, which you can get at discount stores. So if a gang member just buys that from a discount store and blends in, like, what's the point?
Well, gang members would then be unable to recognize each other, and also lots of school uniforms have logos on them, which makes them harder to find and like more exclusive to the school only.
Okay. Arya?
Isn't it worse if we're not able to identify gang members because we don't know who to stay away from and who to trust?
Well, gangs are usually put together for multiple people for a reason. So if they can't recognize each other, it's the equivalent of not having a gang at all if they can't tell who's a part of their gang and who isn't.
Awesome, that is time. Lena, ready to begin? Lead us off whenever you are ready.
Okay. AT, school uniforms decrease gang violence. Link turn, school uniforms don't affect gang violence. Peter Karsko, junior high school teacher in Mesa Reyes, wrote in 1996, as far as gang identification, the use of colors is a small facet of the gang culture. Students who are involved in gang activity will find other ways to show their presence. Simply imposing a school uniform policy cannot be expected to handle a problem as complex as this one. The financial cost outweighs gang violence because in many cases, people cannot afford healthcare without financial stability. Throughout life, money is necessary to survive, and without it, their lives become unstable far into the future. Financial costs affect the rest of their lives and has long-standing effects such as debt. My card outweighs their card because theirs is not as logical, and while we both don't have recent cards and there is no data, logic should be how you define this debate. And gang violence is a very, very big issue that cannot be simply solved by school uniforms.
Cool. Questions from the audience? We'll start out with Arya.
Can you explain why it's less logical?
It's less logical because theirs said that gang violence would be gangs would be more identificational, but there's other ways to identify people, and it has not been had a study in theirs either showing that this is a warrant, while my logic with the gang violence is a very big issue shows that throughout.
Mira?
You say that gang violence is a big issue that can't be solved with just school uniforms, but wouldn't school uniforms be a step in the right direction to decrease gang violence?
It would, but still the gang violence, may also harm gang violence because there may be other ways of showing gang presence, and school uniforms wouldn't really solve anything but only be a financial burden.
A last question at random, Jasmine.
You said that gang members could show their presence other ways. Can you give examples on how?
They could show their presence through art, through graffiti and things like that, along with accessories, different products, and those types of things. Uniforms are not the only, clothes are not the only way that they would be able to show their presence.
Okay, that is time. Sarah, you are up.
AT, uniforms increase financial costs. Link turn, school uniforms decrease financial costs. Leah Ingram, author and blogger, wrote in 2016, according to a 2013 survey from the National Association of Elementary School Principals, 77% of respondents estimated the average cost of school uniforms per child per year was $150 or less. According to the National Retail Federation in 2013, parents spent close to $231 per child on back-to-school clothing. Back to that NAESP survey, 86% of parents surveyed believed that having school uniforms makes shopping for back to school a more budget-friendly endeavor. Gang violence outweighs financial cost because injury or even death cannot be comparable to a price tag or mere money. Financial cost doesn't matter if it results in someone's death or injury, which would cause a larger issue than financial cost could. My card is better than theirs because my card comes from a professional source, which is much harder to corrupt or sway in a certain direction, while one doctor of education may not be trustworthy through sponsoring or relationships such as friends who work in the school uniform industry.
Awesome. Questions from the audience, or I'll call it random. So we'll start out with random. Amin.
I don't have a question.
Okay, try to have a question. Mira.
You say that the survey was taken in 2013. So how do you know that still applies today?
Well, it's still applies because okay, hold on. It still applies because 2013 is also much more recent than my opponent's, which was 2011 in their constructive. So even if mine is not as recent as theirs, it will have more accurate information than theirs does.
Anushka.
So you say your card is from a more professional source. How does professional source make a card better? Or how does it outweigh like the data or of the card or the studies?
So my more professional source, the Gang Intelligence Committee, would outweigh the opponents, a doctor of education, because they would get sponsoring from the government, while the doctor of education may need sponsoring from a company, which could be a or a company that provides school uniforms or something similar, which would sway them to get the favor of the sponsor more.
Eugene.
Well, this survey was taken with elementary school principals, but our topic is secondary schools. So how can this be, the same and reliable?
The uniforms that are used in both schools, maybe the only difference would be like they're bigger, but the cost in relation to the child would be very similar.
Okay, that is time. Summary speech, ready to go?
Should I start?
Lead us off.
I win because mine is more logical. Financial cost outweighs gang violence because in many cases, people cannot afford healthcare without financial stability, and without financial stability, many people could be sent into debt. They say that uniforms decrease cost, extend. Gao Zhuomia, who has Decree 11, wrote that it's harder for families have spoken that it's harder for them to pay for school. Extend Education Policy Social Analysis 19. If a majority of people in their school wear school uniforms, students are more pressured to drop out due to the high cost. They say that my card may be biased, but I have two cards. It was a large survey, and that yours could also be biased by the government, seeing as the government does not always have the best intention for schools. Extend Peter Karasu, 1996, as far as gang identification is a large problem and school uniforms is a very small thing and it cannot be expected to solve a problem as large as that one. Mine is more logical. You should prefer my card because it's more logical, and this matters because the logic will flow throughout time, and though other things and factors may change, the logic is still, while theirs is not, because theirs may also be biased and not as reasonable throughout time.
Awesome. Okay, last speech.
Okay. I win because I have a more trustworthy source. Health and gang violence is more important than cost, because if you can avoid injury in the first place, you won't have to worry about medical bills or the cost of having to pay for an injury. They say that uniforms increase or have no effect on gang violence, but it shows that uniforms can prevent gang members from wearing gang colors and insignia and prevent gangs from identifying each other, which will make it harder for them to communicate. They say that my card is less logical, but they don't give a clear reason. And my card is quite logical, as it is also, for example, my rebuttal is more recent than theirs. Sorry about the noise in the background. Extend Leah Ingram 2016. According to a 2013 survey from the National Association of Elementary School Principals, majority of the respondents estimated that the cost of the school uniforms was much cheaper than the cost of the normal clothes per child. Prefer my card over theirs because my card has a more recent survey and it has data from a large group of respondents from a professional source. They say that mine could be biased by the government, but the chances that the Gang Intelligence Committee is biased compared to a doctor of education is by is much less, since it is a large group of people. Meanwhile, the doctor of education is one person, and their opinion would change the entire course of the study. Meanwhile, the Gang Intelligence Committee would have to have a larger agreement, which would be much more difficult since people have different opinions.
Awesome. That is our debate. Congratulations, everyone.